She had been missing for 43 years. Karen Schepers disappeared in the early 1980s from a small town in Illinois. She was young, there were no witnesses, there was no body. There was almost nothing. Just a woman who had been there and then was not. And the years that followed where the case went cold and then colder and finally quiet. The file sat. Cases like hers usually do. Then, in the spring of 2025, a police department in a different Illinois county did something unusual. They made a podcast about it. One episode. The kind of thing that felt more like a long shot than a strategy. They described what they knew, what they didn't know, and they asked the public a direct question. Does anyone remember anything? Within weeks of that episode going live, they found her. Karen Schepers was at the bottom of a river. She had been there, in all likelihood, for most of those 43 years. 43 years of her family not knowing. 43 years of a question that nobody could answer because nobody was quite close enough to the answer to say the words out loud. The podcast had been downloaded 7,184 times when it was polled for the investigation. One of those downloads turned into a tip. One tip led investigators somewhere new, and somewhere new led to a woman at the bottom of a river finally found. The Illinois case didn't make major national headlines. It was a local story, reported quietly, in the way that solved cold cases often are, with relief rather than fanfare. But it became something else in true crime circles because it raised a question nobody had quite asked before. What if the backlog of unsolved missing persons cases isn't about resources? What if it's about reach? There are thousands of cases in the United States alone, women who disappeared in the 1970s and 1980s when DNA wasn't a tool, when communication was limited to the people in a room, when the geographic radius of an investigation was defined by driving distance. Cases that went cold not because investigators stopped caring, but because the information they needed was sitting in the memory of someone who had no idea the police were still looking. A podcast reaches that person. A YouTube video reaches that person. A Reddit post at the right moment, shared by the right person, reaches that person. Karen Schepers was found because someone listened to an episode of a podcast that would have been forgotten by most people before breakfast. She had been missing for 43 years. A podcast found her in weeks. Her family knows where she is now. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, almost everything. The killer has not been found. The investigation remains open. But somewhere out there, in a town in Illinois, there is a person who remembers something, who heard something once, or saw something, or was told something by someone who is probably also gone now. And maybe somewhere there's a podcast they haven't listened to yet, or a video they haven't watched, or a comment they haven't left. Karen Schepers deserved to be found. She was.